So one of the treats for me as a medical journalist is I get to travel the world meeting very, very, very cool people. And to sit on the stage with Edna today is really quite a treat because she doesn't know it, but I was at her hospital in the late, it was built in 2002, was it not? I was there in 2007 and knew of her, read about her, saw you in the PBS documentary. So it's a thrill for me to sit here and interview you today. Let me start from the basics. Your childhood. I know Somalia well. In Somaliland, as a young woman, you were not afforded the same education as the boys, but you sneaked around and you picked up bits and pieces. How did you do that in a primarily male-dominated culture, when girls weren't allowed to go to school?
Well, I'm from Somaliland. I'm not from Somalia.
All right, Somaliland.
Two distinct countries. One was former British Somaliland, and Somalia was La Somalia Italiana.
Right.
As there was La Côte Française de Somalie, which is now Djibouti.
Right.
Now, in British Somaliland Protectorate, when I was a child, there were no schools for girls, period. Education was not good for girls. What good would come out of a girl who's taught to read and write? Keep her at home. Don't send her to school. That was the mentality that's in those schools. But I had neighbors, I had boys who were going to school, and my father, who was a doctor and the first doctor and father of healthcare, we always had books, and we had space in our house. And he assigned a veranda in our house where there was a blackboard, and in the afternoons, a teacher would come to gather the boys from the neighborhood and go over their lessons and teach them how to read and write. And so when he taught them how to write the letter A, I learned to write the letter A, and the B and the C and the D. And I just taught myself to read. So my parents discovered that I could identify letters of the alphabet from my dad's books. And they said, well, she's teaching herself to read. What do? The nearest school for girls was in Djibouti, La Côte Française de Somalie. And French became my first foreign language. That's where I went to school. And in 1953, the very first school for girls was opened. And I became a pupil teacher there.
And what drew you to midwifery?
Midwifery, if you ask my mother, she would say, oh, I had a crazy husband and he gave me a crazy daughter. I grew up...
We should have more of those combinations.
I just grew around my father, and I was used to him being called in the middle of the night. And although I was a child and usually on holidays from school, I would hang around the hospital, and he would say, could you go and wash those forceps for me and make sure you're clean? Would you go and get that child to swallow this medicine? Would you go? And he would get me to do little errands.
And at the age of 11, you were ordering hospital staff around.
Yes, whenever he would go away, he would make a little list for me and say, I'll be gone for 2 days. Now make sure that tomorrow the sutures come out. Make sure that they release the catheter. Make sure that they do. So I didn't know how to release a catheter. I didn't know how to remove sutures. But I was a boss's daughter, so I would say, did you release the catheter? Did you remove the sutures? So that's how I got into it. And then I would always hear him wishing for things and saying, oh, I wish I had a better pair of scissors than this. Oh, I wish I had, And I just made a mental promise, a mental note to myself that one day I would build the kind of hospital and have the kind of instruments and equipment my father would have liked to use and work with. That got into me.
In the meantime, you became the first lady of your home country. You became well known at the UN, at the World Health Organization, and developed a very global image in public health.
That's the legacy I had. I'm from Somaliland. There was nobody else to do it. And I had so many privileges that very few other women had had. I went to school. I could read. I won a scholarship. British taxpayers' money paid for my education. I was sent to England at the age of 17. And I know there are thousands of us around now, but I was the only Somali female in all of London at that time. We were such a rarity that as a student, my part-time job was working for the BBC. And whenever they needed a female voice, I would be that female voice. So that was instead of doing babysitting or whatever, that was my income. That was my part-time job.
When you were a little girl and you dreamed of a hospital, and then your life took you in this sort of global mission, and then back in Somaliland, how did you get permission to build on what was a garbage dump? And how did you get government and private finance to work together in a country that's not well known for that?
Well, to grant a permission to a nurse who wants to build a hospital is like pulling teeth anywhere, anyway.
I would say the same thing in this country too.
So why do you want to build a hospital? Why would you want to do that? This is going to look bad for the government, that a woman has to build a hospital. This is the kind of thing that governments do. So you have to fight that hurdle and jump all those hurdles. Eventually, I was granted. This is the second hospital, by the way. This is not my only madness. There was a previous madness in Mogadishu.
And you sold off everything. You put your own
yes,
money.
I put my own money. Well, the first hospital was in Mogadishu, and before it was finished, the warlords took it.
Right.
Somebody had a gun, which is far more powerful than paper and deeds and licenses. And I thought, well, that's it. I tried.
I know that hospital too, and I have to tell you, it is sad what has happened to the hospital. I've been in that hospital, and war takes a terrible toll, especially on women and children.
Oh yeah, they're the easiest target.
Yeah.
Any bully picks on the weakest.
Right.
So you go over this anger and say, I tried, I failed, I didn't do it. That's it. From now on, whatever I make is mine. Anybody else can stew in their own juice. And then in 1991, my country, I will show you some slides, my country recovered from a long civil war with Somalia, and Somaliland was totally destroyed and leveled to the ground. And I visited my hometown in 1991, and I couldn't even find our house. We recognize our homes when they're standing. The shape and the design and the architecture gives our house an identity. But when it's rubble, when the whole neighborhood is flattened, you don't know where your house begins and your neighbor's house ends. And I thought, no, I cannot stay angry. This I must do. And I was about to retire, and the president of my country, Somaliland, was my first husband. So I, went to him, and we were friends, and I said, well, I'm retiring, and I need to build a hospital. And he said, what? Again? but you're not young anymore. I mean, you're about to retire. You want to build a hospital? I said, well, do you like being the president of a country that has no hospitals? So that was what turned the tide. And he said, well, what do you want me to do then? I said, well, first of all, I want you to give me the license. And don't let me jump all the hurdles that Siad Barre made me jump when I was building the first hospital. And that's how I got the land. And he said, well, how big a hospital? So I said, well, this is the design. And I said, but that's big. I don't have land to take that, except if I give you land on the outskirts of town. I said, no, outskirts of town. This is not a leprosarium. This is not this is a maternity hospital. It has to have, it has to be close to where the women are. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a woman in labor will not go to the outskirts of town. And he said, well, I cannot give you the stadium, but what about that place? And that place, he didn't have to give it a name. That place was a place that had once been a cemetery. It had been leveled by Siad Barre and turned into a military parade ground. It was one of those military sites where, on army days, they would parade their
Right.
tanks. My machine
Right.
can kill more people than your
Right.
machine.
The boy model.
Yeah, that's right. And then it became an execution ground. And then after the war, it became a garbage dump. So any old trash you had, that's where you would throw. And I said, I want to give you a hospital. A hospital should be clean. A place that smells nice and where the sick come to be treated. And you want to give me a garbage dump? you men will never understand. So I said, well, wait a minute, think about it. I said, no, I'm not even thinking about it. So I left in a huff, took my UN flight back to Djibouti, and started thinking about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew that that place had to be the place where I built my hospital. Because that's a place that had known injustice, pain, suffering, and was like a big ulcer in the heart of the city, in an area where they had never had a hospital before.
And that's where the healing started.
That's where the healing started. And I came back the next week and not quite showing my tail between my legs. And I said, well, supposing I accepted that place, now what am I going to do with a mountain of garbage? Oh, we'd bulldoze it for you. And that's exactly what the government did.
So Christy talked about the maternal mortality rate of 1 in 12. You not only have reduced mortality rates, you focused a lot of your attention on fistulas. And I know that for most of the women in this room, there are scents for which your brain has no recognition. I can't describe to you the smell of a woman where urine and feces are dripping out of her vagina, which I know sounds quite grotesque, but it is the norm. But it is a very sweet, pungent, rare smell that the Western brain just has no recognition of until you smell it, and it jolts you. So these women end up becoming the social pariahs of many countries.
It is, and as a midwife, that's what I see. And you and I are sitting here, we're clean, we were in control of our body secretions, but these women have no control over that.
And is this because of genital mutilation and female circumcision?
Well, I would like to blame as many things on female genital mutilation as I can, but this time I cannot. It's one of the many causes. It's a hole that happens between the urethra and the bladder, between the vagina and the bladder of the woman. And with the head, usually when the head cannot come out, cannot be delivered and becomes impacted, it presses on that very thin tube, the urethra, and which becomes necrotic and has a hole. And urine leaks from there, and it can also happen between the vagina and the rectum. So you can have both a rectovaginal fistula and a vesicovaginal fistula at the same time, or one or the other.
And usually this is because women can't get to the hospital in time.
They are not delivered by people who know how to deliver, who are trained midwives. They're delivered by their grandmother, their neighbor, their friend, their sister. And one woman, I'm 75, I think I've seen many things in life. One of the most shocking things that I have seen was a woman who had a transverse lie. The baby was lying sideways, not by the head or the breech, and it prolapsed an arm. And the only person I know, I mean, after breakfast, it's not good.
Oh no, it's.
But
we do take for granted in this country that you feel a few Braxton Hicks contractions and off to the hospital you go.
Oh, yes.
The reality is that's not a lot of people's
The only
reality.
person, that woman with a prolapsed arm, showed the presentation was her 9-year-old daughter. And all the 9-year-old daughter could do was just pull on that arm. And the arm comes off. Anyway, the woman was brought, she was still alive. We saved her. The baby was, of course, very, very dead. And can you imagine the trauma of that little girl?
Right.
Who her mother is saying, pull,
Right.
get it out, not knowing that it will not come out.
And then the damage done later for future pregnancies.
Of course. The emotional, the physical, the psychological, everything is gone. And it's all because they do not have trained midwives. And that's why I have set myself this goal, that we must train more midwives, not only in Somaliland, but everywhere.
One of the things we've talked about in a lot of the breakout sessions here is how to get people, the talent into various organizations. How do you attract the talent you need?
I go, I speak, I talk, I pray. Some hear me, many don't. And I'm here because I have, well, first of all, you're on the screen. You have the Friends of the Edna Hospital. It's a group of American women and Somali men and women who have formed a charity registered in the US, and they gather, they raise funds for us. I built the hospital with my own funds, but when my funds ran out, they were the support. I had the American, your taxpayers' money, build the outpatients for me. I have a generator today when the power goes out that was donated by Denmark. The British gave me a lot of equipment and the operating theater. I am blessed. I am blessed.
Well,
and I have my UN pension. When I die, that will stop.
If you die.
I
You might be one of those people who gets an option.
for the world, I think it's better.
What is the one mistake that Western, well-meaning, nonprofit organizations make when they come into somebody else's country?
I think criticism, tactless criticism, rather than helping the third world or that country to solve its problem or giving advice, very often they criticize, which brings down the shutters between those needing the help and those who have the potential to help. So I think tact is a good way that brings people together. Not, why are you doing this? This is savage, this is barbaric, it doesn't make friends.
Are you surprised when people talk about you in terms of getting a Nobel Prize?
Oh, I wish they would give me instruments and give me equipment and
I think that's I think that's analogous to yesterday's size doesn't always matter comment.
I think, if you want my opinion, my hero is Dr. Catherine Hamlin, someone who really inspires.
An Australian OBGYN.
OBGYN who spent her life fixing fistula, and if anybody deserves a Nobel, she does.
So in our closing moments, you have a few pictures you want to show?
I would love to show
Please,
that.
please.
May I do that? And I
think they'll be on everyone's screens.
I don't know where the screen is. Oh, I see.
Yes.
Is it happening?
They're technologically advanced.
It's just to tell you where Somaliland is and in perspective. Now, that picture, I'm sorry, is horrible. But that was my country. After the Civil War, there are human remains there, and many of them are children. What the military advantages of killing 2- and 5-year-old and 10-year-old kids and putting them into mass graves, I will never know. Somebody felt heroic doing that. That's a hospital before the war. That was my previous reincarnation with President Johnson and Dean Rusk and Lady Bird in the White House lawn being entertained on an official state visit to your country in 1968. Landed there with the presidential helicopter, the 21-gun salute, and so on and so on.
It's pretty heady stuff.
This is the banquet, of course, in the White House. Vice President Hubert Humphrey and Mrs. Humphrey and my husband next to Lady Bird.
May I say you're really beautiful?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is in Germany, Chancellor Kiesinger. And this is the beginning of my hospital. I don't have pictures of the garbage dump, but that's when we're laying the foundation and built. And built. And built. Now this space, the open, like the gap here, that's my apartment, that's where I live. I cannot live anywhere else, because if I live away, I take my pension with me. So I live on the hospital premises, I live there. And if you were to visit me, you would be living with me there. That's where Nicholas Kristof and his team stayed with me, and Diana Lane. And that's the hospital. That's my baby, I love it. Some think I own it. I know it owns me.
Well, I can
and that's the first baby born in the hospital, about 8 hours. Now these are my children. These are the girls. That's the future of my country. That's the future of hospitals. That's the first group of students being trained, and some graduating. And these, the girls in red, these are the midwives. These are the ones I would like to clone. And we need over 1,000 of them. And I have some documents here that I can share with everybody. And of course, the blue, dark blue are the more senior ones. We just graduated our very first 21 midwives who got their Bachelor of Science degree in midwifery. It took me a lifetime, but we just got it
Congratulations.
this month. And we don't discriminate against boys. We train lab technicians and pharmacists as well.
I like the men in the subservient positions, though.
Well, and this is our OR, and we do a lot of surgery. Anybody from the Coca-Cola? That's the second biggest Coca-Cola plant in Africa, and it's in Somaliland, and the students are having a field trip there, stacks of Coke.
There you go.
And they are on the grounds of the Coca-Cola factory. I don't know, this is not clicking, but that's it. Time's up.
Edna,
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.